Now that you have the three most important vital keys down, you're going to notice that there's a handful of other tools available for you up here. I'm going to be talking about the pivot, Vertex Snap, and mirroring tool, and these really just give you more fine-tuned control over the program. The pivot tool, first and foremost, that is going to be the pivot itself is the point from which your item is going to rotate, right? So the pivot point for the head, for example, is at the base of the head. If you look at the pivot point of like the arm, for example, it's going to be at the shoulder. That is basically the point of rotation of each cube. The reason why this matters is because every single item within a folder is going to inherit the pivot of the folder. So for example, we made this flower, right? This flower has inherited the rotation pivot of the head, which if we want to rotate the entire flower altogether, we're going to notice that it's going to be rotating on that pivot point right there. And that's going to be a little bit inconvenient, mostly because it's this wide circle that's not super intuitive to work with. We're going to want to move the pivot point. In order to do that, select your flower folder, click on pivot tool, or P, and then just drag the pivot point to where you want it to rotate from. This is useful, for actually rotating these or moving these entire items together, these entire folders together. But it'll also be really, really important if you want to get into any sort of animation in Blockbench or in CPM later on. But it's good to know. So now that we've moved the pivot point right there, when I rotate this flower, it's going to rotate on the center of the flower instead. Now I can push it forward a little bit, It's giving me a little more control over that flower. So that's the pivot tool. Now we're going to talk about the Vertex Snap tool, which is a really useful one. Let's say that I have this cube, right, and I've rotated it. I'm going to turn off the hat for this example. I've rotated this cube, and it's something like this, and I'm trying to actually get this tippy point to get perfectly flush with the head. That can be a little tedious to do by hand, so what you want to do instead is click on Vertex Snap. It's going to show you these gray points at the very corners of this cube. You're going to want to click on the corner, then click on the block you want it to be flush to, and you'll see it creates a line, and it shows you those gray dots, and you click on that right there. And now that block is going to be perfectly flush to whatever cube it is you want it to be on, and you can use this for a variety of things. This could easily be a pair of door key ears if I really wanted to work on it, right? So you're going to notice that it does this bugging out animation when you do that sometimes. This is called Z-fighting, and it's really easy to fix. You could just move it like this, or you could go over here to the element and just add an obscene amount of zeros and put a 1 at the end. Add a minuscule decimal point, essentially, of movement to this cube. That will make it seem perfectly flush, but really there is some sort of microscopic edge there somewhere. And that will make your cube perfectly flush. Now let's say I want to do this, but I want it, well, there's still a little bit of Z-fighting. You could just, mess with it as much as you need to. But let's say I want to do this on both sides of the head, and I want it to be perfectly, the same. I'm going to delete this cube. That's when mirror modeling comes in. So mirror modeling, you're going to want to make sure it's enabled, and make sure you're always conscious of whether it's enabled or not, because sometimes, and this is a huge pain in the butt, sometimes you leave this enabled and then you will move the entire head and you will make entire duplicate folders of the head. You don't want that. So mirror modeling is enabled. Now you just click Add Cube. I'm going to bring this cube up here, and then the second I move it away from the center, boom. Now I've made two beautiful ears for my cat character. This is a duplicate cube, for what it's worth, so when you actually create a texture for this, the UV maps are going to be overlapping. That's not a problem, it's just something you need to be aware of, because if you do want these two to be different colors, you're going to want to make sure that the UV maps are not overlapping. If that sentence stressed you out, don't think about it right now, okay? It's not too bad. I promise you it won't be scary. They're just scary words. Just worry about doing the modeling part first. You know, this is fun. You've made 2 ears. Great for ears, great for horns, great for ears. You know, just make sure that each of these things is folded correctly. And again, keep a pulse on whether this is on or off, because if it's on and you move the entire head, you're going to have 2. And it's going to be at the very bottom here. And it's not fun when that happens. And that's it.